Ancient, vast, relentless, alive. The African savanna asks only one question of everything that lives here. Are you ready? A lone acacia stands at the edge of the open grassland, perfectly still, as the first light of dawn pulls the darkness apart. Nothing moves yet, or so it seems. Beneath this golden calm, something enormous is already in motion, something that began long before the sun crested the horizon. Deep in the earth, a sound is traveling, too low for any human ear, pushing through soil and stone across miles of open plain. Elephant infrasound, a frequency that can carry a full 6 miles through the ground, is already threading messages between herds we cannot yet see. The savanna doesn't wake up. It was never truly asleep. Within minutes, thousands of animals stir at once, each species running on a different set of rules, different clocks, different urgencies. Zebras move first, cropping the tough upper grass with a systematic patience that seems, on the surface, entirely unremarkable. But that small, ordinary act, a herd grazing at dawn, quietly sets something else in motion, a chain this landscape has been running for millennia. Meanwhile, across the plain, a predator has not yet moved, conserving everything, watching everything, waiting. This is the contract the savanna enforces without mercy. Hunter and hunted, each perfectly shaped by the other, locked in a negotiation that never ends. But when the herds swell to numbers that seem beyond any predator's reach, when prey stretches from one horizon to the other, does sheer size actually keep an animal safe? $1.5 million wildebeest moving as a single body. From the air, it looks like the land itself is shifting. There is a logic to the herd, a kind of math that predators have spent millennia trying to break. When you are surrounded by 10,000 others, the odds that any single predator picks you are vanishingly small. That is the wager every wildebeest makes. But here is what that math doesn't account for. A herd this size cannot hide. The dust column rises hundreds of feet into the sky, visible for miles across open ground. The noise carries farther still. And beneath it all, a scent trail so dense it saturates the air, a living signal, broadcasting the herd's position to everything with a nose. Wildebeest navigate this annual passage using something remarkable, a sensitivity to Earth's own magnetic field, an internal compass refined across countless generations. They always find the route, and so does everything that hunts them. Around 250,000 wildebeest die each year along this migration, not all of them taken by predators, but predators know exactly where to wait. The herd doesn't just move through the landscape, it rewrites it. Trampled corridors, stripped grassland, river crossings churned to mud. Every trace the herd leaves behind is a map, and that map is never private. The subsonic rumble that once spoke of elephants moving in the dark now carries a different weight. Something else is reading the same ground, following the same lines. Numbers offer safety, but they also make you impossible to miss. So the real question isn't whether the herd can be found. It's whether a single predator, working alone, can turn all of that into a kill. The cheetah had been tracking the same herd for 40 minutes, closing to 30 yards before a single bull turned and the chase dissolved before it began. Out here, a single lion can hold 50 square miles. Not by force, not by running down every animal it sees, but by being known, by being felt, the way a storm is felt before it arrives. This is the art of the invisible predator, and it rewrites everything we think we know about power on the open plain. A pride hasn't moved in hours, resting in the shade of the grassland's edge, and yet the wildebeest half a mile away are already drifting, quietly, without panic, just enough to keep distance they cannot explain. They don't need to see the lion. They only need to sense that it might be there. That low subsonic tremor moves again across the ground. The same frequency that once carried an elephant's warning 6 miles, and every hoofed animal within range adjusts without knowing why. Fear, it turns out, is a landscape feature. The cheetah operates differently. All speed, all precision, built to close ground faster than 60 miles an hour, spine coiling and releasing like a spring, claws gripping the earth on every stride. But here is what speed costs. The moment the chase ends, the cheetah is spent, vulnerable, exposed, and the savannah always has witnesses. Spotted hyenas work the edges of that vulnerability, reading exhaustion the way a trader reads a falling market. Patient, opportunistic, rarely wrong. So each predator carves its territory, not with boundaries you can draw on a map, but with memory. The prey's memory of where danger last appeared, how it moved, what it smelled like. One predator, one shadow, and miles of grassland subtly reorganized around it. But if prey animals are constantly being shaped by predator pressure, learning, rerouting, adapting in real time, then who exactly is driving whom? It looks like a fixed arrangement. One side hunts, the other flees, and the roles never switch. But the longer you watch, the more that certainty starts to crack. Consider what happens on the grass itself, where zebras strip away the tough, fibrous upper growth and wildebeest follow to reach the tender shoots below. that is not coincidence. It is choreography, driven by hunger, and it pulls two separate herds into the same corridor at the same time. And when two herds converge, a lion pride doesn't need to search. It only needs to wait. So the prey, in feeding, is quietly scheduling the hunt. Now here is what complicates the picture. Lion prides rely on their males to lead the critical moments of a chase, to hold formation, to press the advantage when it matters most. That dependence is a vulnerability, one the savannah has learned to read. When prey herds shift their routes even slightly, they stretch the distance a pride must cover, and a pride that must cover more. Ground is a pride that tires faster. The acacia at the edge of the plain stands witness to this. Neither predator territory nor prey refuge, just the boundary where the pressure from both sides meets. Beneath it all, a low subsonic pulse seems to move through the grass, not warning, not signal, just the sound of a system in motion, adjusting, counter-adjusting, never resolving. No species commands this system from the center. Each shapes the other and is shaped in return. Which raises the question that the next hour of this savannah will force us to answer. If the hunted can redirect the hunter, then who exactly is writing the rules? We've been watching the wrong animal. Every time a lion crouches in the grass, every time a leopard holds its breath at the edge of cover, something else is already happening. Something quieter and far more deliberate. The prey is not waiting to be found. It is deciding where the predator gets to look. Zebra stripes may help confuse a sickle-chasing cat, fragmenting the visual logic of the hunt, turning a galloping herd into a wall of motion that a predator's eye struggles to parse cleanly. But the stripes are only the surface of something deeper. A giraffe can clock 35 miles an hour at a full run, and a single kick from those long legs carries enough force to stop a lion cold. These are not accidents of anatomy. They are built-in deterrents, each one silently renegotiating the terms of every encounter before the chase even begins. Here is the part that changes how you see the whole savannah. When a wildebeest herd shifts its route, even by a fraction of a mile, every lion pride in that territory has to move farther to compensate, burning energy it cannot easily replace. A pride that covers more ground each week is a pride edging toward exhaustion, and exhaustion, out here, is its own kind of death sentence. The prey doesn't know any of this, not consciously, but the effect is the same. Collective movement, collective alarm calls, collective rerouting, all of it reshaping the savannah in real time, one small decision at a time. Beneath all of it, low and steady, that subsonic pulse, the one that started at dawn moves through the herd again, a thread connecting every animal on the plain to the same invisible network. So if prey animals are already engineering the landscape around them, setting traps of exhaustion, walls of confusion, corridors of risk, what happens when fear itself becomes the sharpest tool in their arsenal? Fear has a reputation problem. We read it as weakness, a trembling, a flinch, the moment an animal betrays its own vulnerability to the world watching from the grass. But on the savannah, that reading is wrong, and the animals that survive longest know it. Fear is not the opposite of power here. It is how power travels across open ground without a single claw being drawn. Watch a zebra herd change direction, not because a predator charged, but because one animal caught a scent, shifted its weight, and every animal within 50 feet mirrored that decision in under a second. That ripple is not panic. It is information moving faster than any individual could process alone. The herd has learned to outsource its nervous system to the group, and the result is a collective intelligence that no single predator can fully outpace. Here is what makes this stranger than it sounds. The predator benefits too. A lion pride that holds a territory does not need to hunt every day. The threat of its presence alone pushes prey herds into predictable corridors, compressing their movement into patterns the pride can read and time. Fear, in this sense, is doing work that muscle cannot. It is organizing the landscape before the hunt even begins. And yet the system is not clean, and it is not kind to the predator either, because that same fear is slowly rewriting the lion's calendar. Every detour a herd takes, every half mile rerouted around a known danger zone, adds distance the pride must now cover just to stay close to a reliable food source. A quiet arithmetic that accumulates week after week. Now consider the cheetah, a hunter so precisely tuned to a single explosive moment that recovery time isn't optional, it is structural. That vulnerability window after a high-speed chase is not a flaw in the design. It is the price the body charges for speed, and every hyena on the plain has learned to read the signs. So prey fear sharpens predator efficiency, but predator overreach creates the exact gap that rivals exploit. Fear cycles through every layer of this system, and none of them are exempt. That low subsonic pressure you sense moving through the ground, the one that started at dawn with the elephants, it has never really stopped. It runs beneath every tense standoff, every aborted charge, every herd that turns before the strike lands. It is the savannah's shared nervous system, humming at a frequency most creatures feel before they understand. fear does not dissolve when the predator moves on. It lingers in the soil of a place, shaping where animals will graze tomorrow and the day after that, long after the last footprint has dried. That is not weakness stored in the land, that is memory, and memory is architecture. But when the fear finally pays off, when a hunt ends and a body lies still on the open grass, who exactly is waiting for what comes next? A carcass hits the ground, and within minutes the savannah knows. Vultures drop from thermals a mile high, converging in tight spirals, a living signal flare that broadcasts death across the plain to every scavenger within sight of the sky. What looks like an ending is, in every biological sense, an opening. The savannah runs no waste disposal system, it runs something far more elegant, a hierarchy of consumption where each species unlocks the next, passing energy downward in precise, overlapping turns. Here is where the spotted hyena's reputation needs a hard correction. Popular myth has painted them as skulking thieves, cowardly hangers-on trailing behind lions, surviving on scraps they didn't earn. The reality inverts that entirely. Hyenas are among the most effective processors on the savannah, capable of consuming bone, hide, and tissue that would defeat nearly any other carnivore, their jaws generating pressure that turns skeleton into nutrient. And they don't operate as lone opportunists. Spotted hyena society runs on a strict matriarchal structure where even the lowest-ranking female outranks every male in the clan. Order, hierarchy, coordinated decision-making. The animal dismissed as a scavenger runs one of the most organized social systems on the continent. But here's what no one asks. What happens to the savannah if the scavengers disappear? Carcasses that linger become disease reservoirs, anthrax, botulism, pathogens that don't distinguish between species, spreading outward through soil and water, cycling back into prey and predator alike. The scavenger is not the end of the chain. It is the mechanism that closes the loop. Strip it out, and the system doesn't slow. It fractures. Every gram of returned nutrient feeds the grass feeds the grazers sustain the hunters, and the hunters eventually return to the ground. High above, a single vulture banks against the orange rim of afternoon, riding a thermal that began at the scorched earth below. The lone acacia at the plain's edge holds still, and perched at its crown, barely visible, something patient waits. Death here is not a wall, it's a door. But if energy circulates this precisely, if every boundary of consumption has its own enforcer, its own gatekeeper, What force actually holds those boundaries in place across miles of open ground? The savannah looks lawless, open ground stretching in every direction, no fences, no markers, nothing to tell one animal where it ends and another begins. But that assumption is wrong, and every predator on this plain knows it. Order here isn't enforced by walls or wire. It's written in scent glands pressed against grass stems, in calls that carry farther than any eye can follow, in the memory of violence that outlasts the moment it happened. A lion pride's territory isn't simply the ground they walk. It's the ground everything else avoids, shaped by a language most animals read fluently, and humans are only beginning to understand. And here's what makes that territory strange. It's the females who enforce it, directly, physically, face to face with any challenger who crosses the line. The dominant male holds status, but when a rival appears at the border, it's the lionesses who move first, who close the distance, who decide whether that boundary holds. Authority and defense are not the same thing on the savannah, and the species that confuse the two rarely survive the lesson. Across the grassland, African wild dogs are negotiating something even more unusual, not just where they go, but whether they go at all. Before the pack moves, they sneeze, literally, repeatedly, and with purpose, each individual casting a vote on whether the hunt begins, the sneezes tallied like hands raised in a meeting no human called. What looks like chaos is actually consensus, running on a frequency we almost missed entirely. Every species on this plain is transmitting, constantly, chemical signals layered across every surface, low-frequency sound pressed into the ground itself, behavioral cues so precise they can redirect an entire herd without a single physical contact. The invisible map is always being redrawn, and right now, something is about to redraw it in a way no animal can negotiate with or run from. When fire moves across the savannah, it doesn't recognize territory, it doesn't read scent marks, and it doesn't stop at borders. So what happens to the order that took generations to build? It starts as a shimmer on the horizon, a thin orange line that most animals won't recognize until it's already too late. Savannah fire moves fast, fanned by dry season winds, consuming grass and cover alike with no preference for hunter or hunted. That invisible map, every scent boundary, every watched corridor, every remembered watering route, gone in minutes. The lone acacia at the plain's edge stands, silhouetted, now against a sky the color of molten iron, unchanged, indifferent to what burns beneath it. And beneath that sky, something extraordinary unfolds. Predator and prey retreating in the same direction, side by side. A pride of lions moves at a walk, not a stalk, No crouching, no flanking, simply moving away as wildebeest stream past within yards. For a narrow window, the hunt is suspended, not by choice, but by a force that neither side can outmaneuver or negotiate with. But here is what makes fire unlike any other pressure this ecosystem faces. It doesn't just threaten individuals, it erases the very geometry that structures survival. Without established boundaries, lions can't coordinate. Without familiar corridors, herds can't read danger and scatter efficiently. Every species is, briefly, an animal without a map, and on the savannah, that disorientation can be more lethal than the flames. Then the fire passes, and the grass, still warm, already regrowing, pulls something unexpected back into the open. Grazers arrive first, drawn to the new flush of green that rises from ash within days, concentrated, exposed, and watched. The predators know this, and they wait, patient at the blackened edge where burned ground meets unburned, a seam that now replaces the old territorial lines. Fire didn't break the relationship between hunter and hunted. It rewrote it, on terms that favor whoever adapts first. When the rains finally come and put an end to the burn season, a harder test begins. Not fire's chaos, but the slow, grinding silence of drought. When water becomes the only thing that matters, who reaches their limit first? The predator that must sprint to eat, or the prey that must walk miles just to drink? Weeks without rain do something no predator can. They level the playing field. The grass has turned to wire, the water holes are cracking mud, and every animal on this plain is running a calculation it cannot afford to get wrong. Hunger and thirst don't distinguish between hunter and hunted. A lion pride that hasn't eaten in days moves differently. Slower through the heat, less selective, more reckless, willing to attempt hunts it would have abandoned a month ago. That recklessness is a signal, and the wildebeest read it. But here's what's strange. The prey herds are exhausted too, forced miles beyond their usual range by dried-up water sources, exposing flanks they'd never expose in a normal season. Both sides are past their limit, and the question isn't who is stronger, it's who collapses first. Beneath that cracked earth, along the last thread of the river, something has barely moved in days. The Nile crocodile, its heartbeat dropped to a near standstill, burning almost nothing, just waiting. It has turned stillness into a weapon that the drought cannot touch. The crocodile doesn't pace, doesn't hunt wide, doesn't panic, and when the desperate, thirst-driven herds finally push toward the water's edge, that patience collects its payment in full. The lone acacia at the plain's edge casts almost no shadow now. The sun is too high, the air too dry, and the vultures are circling lower than they did last week. When drought strips every buffer away, every margin of energy, every alternative route, every safe distance, the question stops being about predator or prey. It becomes something stranger. What happens when two exhausted enemies are crowded into the same shrinking patch of shade, and neither has enough left to be the threat it once was? Two exhausted enemies crowded into the same shrinking patch of shade, and neither one moves. This is not a truce, not a choice, not trust. It is the Savannah reducing two rivals down to a single shared problem: survive the next hour. Every species on this plain operates on a tight energy budget. Conflict burns fuel. When the threat outside is larger than the threat beside you, the math changes. A waterbuck and a family of warthogs press to the same narrow bank. An impala holds its ground barely 30 feet from a resting lioness. Neither triggers the other. What's strange is that this isn't random. These behavioral crossings, moments when predator and prey suspend normal rules, appear precisely when a third pressure enters the system. Flood, fire, a predator larger and faster than anything either side can manage alone. When the pressure reaches a certain threshold, old hierarchies blur. Somewhere beneath that tense stillness runs something older than competition, a subsonic logic wired into every species here. The same low frequency the elephants broadcast across miles of open grass. The hippo at the river's edge holds a bite force measured in the thousands of pounds per square inch, tusks that can reach 20 inches in length, and right now does nothing with any of it. It floats, eyes open, reading the water. A wide, slow yawn breaks the surface. Not aggression, not a warning, just an animal, for this one moment deeply unbothered. That restraint is not weakness. It is precision. Every calorie spent on a fight that isn't necessary is a calorie gone. The Savannah punishes waste above almost anything else. These moments of suspended hostility don't last. The pressure shifts, the third threat passes, and the old distances reassert themselves, clean and fast. But they reveal something the Savannah doesn't advertise. The connections running between species aren't only about who eats whom. They run deeper, stranger, and quieter than that. Tonight, when the last light pulls away from the acacia and the plain goes dark, will those connections be enough to hold this ecosystem together? Or has the day finally pushed it past the point of return? The light is changing now, pulling long and amber across the open grass, and something in the Savannah shifts with it. All day, the ecosystem absorbed fire, drought, pursuit, and exhaustion, and still it did not break. But absorbed is not the same as unaltered. The zebra herds are reading something invisible, tightening their formations, pressing toward the tree line as the temperature drops a single degree. Those black and white stripes may help dissolve visual clarity at this hour, when definition bleeds out of the world and predators have to rely on movement alone. The lions know this too, and they are already repositioning. Not chasing, not sprinting, just drifting, conserving every calorie their worn pride has left. Weeks of rerouted herds have carved into their reserves in ways that don't show on the surface, not yet. Then, from somewhere across the plain, felt before it is heard, a low, rolling pressure moves through the ground. The acacia stands against the sky, its silhouette fire orange, a single fixed point in a landscape that has been anything but fixed today. The ecosystem has not collapsed, but this evening's stillness is not peace. It is the breath between heartbeats. Every survivor here, predator, prey, and scavenger, has recalibrated, finding a new position inside a system that bends without breaking. And high above the acacia, one bird descends out of a thermal and comes to rest on the uppermost branch, patient, unhurried, waiting for a signal only it knows how to read. When a hunt ends on this savanna, nothing is wasted. But where, exactly, does everything go? The kill is over, but the air hasn't forgotten it. That particular stillness that follows violence, heavy and unresolved, hanging over flattened grass. The acacia at the plain's edge casts its last shadow long across the ground, and a single vulture settles at its crown, still watching, as if tallying up the day. Elephants return to the bones of their dead, sometimes years later, sometimes from distances that suggest intention, running their trunks along familiar contours in what researchers describe as deliberate, attentive contact. They linger, they return again. No signal passes between them, and yet the timing holds. Which means the ecosystem is not only processing matter, it is processing meaning. The nutrients cycle back through soil and grass. The knowledge of loss cycles back through behavior. Both are forms of retention. Both keep the system coherent across time. And what comes next is smaller and harder to see. Beetles and flies working the margins, each species arriving at the precise moment its role requires. Tachi Dnh Hoi Dong. No single claw earned it. No single herd holds it. The savanna doesn't belong to any of them. Spend long enough here, and a strange pattern emerges. Not in any one species, but in the spaces between them, in the pulls and counters that no animal consciously chooses. The flamingos are a useful place to start. Their color is not decoration, it is a record, written in carotenoid pigments absorbed from algae and crustaceans, a direct signature of what the lake has given them. Strip away the algae and the pink fades. Strip away the flamingos and the lake's chemistry shifts. Neither controls the other. Both are changed by what they share. That's the principle running underneath everything we've watched. From the first tremor of infrasound, moving through dark ground before dawn, to the last vulture settling into silence. Dependency isn't weakness here. It is the architecture. Every predator's range is drawn by where prey will go. Every prey animal's route is carved by where danger has been. Consider what the wildebeest's internal compass actually delivers. Not freedom, but predictability. The same corridor, season after season, readable by anyone patient enough to wait. And the predators who wait at those edges, they don't command the land. They are as much a product of it as the grass, shaped by every herd that ever shifted its route by half a mile. The fire burned and reset borders. The drought forced crossings no instinct would have chosen. And still, the system absorbed every rupture and produced the next morning. What keeps this place standing isn't strength. It's tension, the constant, invisible pull between every living thing, none of which is expendable, all of which are replaceable only at a cost. We came here looking for the ruler of this ecosystem, the lion, the elephant, the sheer mass of the migration. None of them qualified. The acacia at the plain's edge has watched all of it, dawn hunts, fire lines, drought and return, without moving an inch, and that perhaps is its own kind of answer.